Chapter 241. Individual Study, Group Study, 6. Fush. Jean regained consciousness once Tess returned to the Fire Kingdom. But controlling his body was not easy due to immense fatigue. "Hey, you're awake, kid. This seems like a disaster. Is this the work of Tess?" Jean spoke after reactivating the Myalta rune and taking a look around. During the few minutes he had been unconscious, the unidentified elephant-shaped golem, hundreds of people, half-orcs, and biological golems had turned to ashes. Tess had returned, but the blue flames surrounding the battlefield had not yet extinguished, radiating heat in the area. The 3 9-star mages had completely lost the will to fight and appeared dumbfounded. "Well, you could say it was your doing since that knight basically borrowed your powers. Only, he used his divine knowledge and experience to explosively utilize that power and— No, that's not the point now. Take a look at this." Jean lifted his head and looked towards the outer wall. A humanoid figure stood there and began descending slowly to the ground. "What is that supposed to be now?" He tilted his head in puzzlement. The 9-star mages followed the couple's gaze and looked towards the same area. They immediately tilted their heads upon seeing the faint figure, wearing an expression that said, "We're saved. Greetings to our leader. Greetings to our leader." The mages kneeled down and shouted. It was a shocking declaration for Jean and Murakan. Is that supposed to be the leader of Kinzalo? Encountering this mysterious figure was completely unexpected. Jean had never spent much time imagining what they might look like. But what he had imagined was not this. It didn't seem to fit in with a terrorist organization like the Kinzalo. In fact, it emitted light. It was as if a deity had descended to Earth. The leader's faint spectral body had a glorious light shining around them. "What's with that faint glow? It's like watching a giant firefly." Murakan expressed his bitter appreciation, to which Jean shrugged. "Yeah, you're right." Despite their casual exchange, both of them were nervous. If they were the leader of an organization that even the Zippel hesitated to wage war against, they undoubtedly had enough skills to prove their worth. "I didn't even sense them approaching. I'm sure they're dangerous. But there's something that doesn't feel real to me. There's no sense of weight in them, as if they were a spirit or a ghost." The leader stood in the midst of the confrontation and did not move for a while. They didn't even spare a glance at their mages. Their head was turned towards Jean. There were about 30 steps between them. A skilled master could always launch an attack at that distance in the blink of an eye. Murakan stood in front of Jean and raised his shadow energy to be able to counterattack immediately in case of an attack. "At last, I meet the most wanted celebrity by the Zippel and the Vermont. Nice to meet you, Bamel." The voice sounded deep. "And as for you, Murakan, long time no see. I heard you woke up from your slumber. If you're guarding him, it seems Bamel is from the Run Candle." It seemed strange that such a big figure would suddenly emerge out of nowhere. "What's your problem? Do you know who I am?" "Of course I know. I saved your life." "Kohaha, you crazy bastard. You saved my life? Who do you think you are, you miserable fool? Is this some kind of comedy? How ridiculous. When Timar tried to kill you after you lost control due to overload, I was the one who stopped that guy." "Murakan, don't you remember who I am? Timar Runcandle." The mere mention of his name painted Murakan's eyes with a murderous rage. Murakan fiercely gathered his shadow energy, as if he was about to attack but soon dismissed it. "Bastard! Whose name are you trying to bring up here? You may seem like an old demon, but there's no way Timar would have joined people like you. An overload? You must have heard something. Huh? The one who lost control that day was not you but Timar? Is that what you're trying to say?" The leader displayed a soft smile. To be precise, it wasn't exactly a smile. The faint portion where their lips should be opened in the shape of a crescent moon. "Forget the fact that you don't recognize me. To think that you remembered that day was Timar's fault. I can't even imagine how disappointed the late one would feel if they ever found out. Bring up Timar's name once more, and I'll kill you and send all those scum called Kinzalo to hell." The only reason Murakan held back from launching an attack was Jean. If Jean had been fine, Murakan would have lunged without a second thought. "That would have been impossible for you. even at your best. But I'm curious. Did your memory reconfigure itself in a more convenient way for you? Shut your mouth. Your reaction tells me that it's probably the latter. Murakin was about to transform into his true form. But Jean grabbed his shoulder. From the conversation, Jean could deduce that the leader knew Murakin quite well. This man understands perfectly what Murakin's weakest points are. Murakin's breath sounded rough due to his anger. Jean could feel him trembling through his hand on the dragon's shoulder. Jean decided that Murakin had fallen into the leader's game. It's just a provocation. Don't fall for it. That bastard, how dare he? Murakin's eyes seemed dazed as he spoke, as if he was enchanted. Calm down. It's the leader of Kinsalo. If we fight without preparations, it's more likely that we'll lose, especially when you're emotionally unstable. Murakin wasn't exactly the rational and calculating type, but Jean had never seen him crumble so much over nothing but words. I understand. We all have something we hate to admit. Whether with reconfigured memories or not, your sorrow for losing that guy, Timar, would still be genuine. In a way, I pity you. Arg. Murakin. Bam. Jean hit Murakin on the back of his neck as hard as he could. He didn't have much strength left, but it was still as powerful as a normal person's hammer blow. Murakin stopped and turned to Jean. Kid? Why did you hit me? Have you gone mad? Get a grip. What the hell are you? Oh, Murakin shook his head. Damn it. I was enchanted by that snake. Sorry for being a mess. The leader of Kinsalo hadn't resorted to any hypnotic or psychic spells, but sowing confusion in Murakin's unstable memories was much more effective. Oh, look at that. It would have been nice to be able to stop your atrocity so easily back then. Jean spoke before Murakin could get angry again. Look, you're not making much of an impression blabbering since you arrived. Murakin and I killed all your men. If you're the leader of Kinsalo, maybe that's the first thing you should be concerned about. Save your feelings about Timar and start worrying about those men of yours we reduced to ashes. The lineage of the conquerors speaks. Yes, you're right. I may have given the impression of being frivolous. I was just glad to meet an old friend. If you realize that, come and avenge your men. Stop wagging that tongue of yours. Kid. But I thought you just told me that we shouldn't confront him without preparations. Murakin looked at Jean with those thoughts. Of course, Jean didn't care. Jean spat towards the leader. He didn't forget to add a mocking gesture, flicking his finger. What are you waiting for? If you were strong enough to stop Timar, the first patriarch of the Runcandle clan, you must be quite a figure, right? If what you say is true, I bet you could take us down with a single blow. What an intriguing guy. You're the one providing all the intrigue here by doing nothing. Maybe Murakin was right. You must be a comedian. Have you ever seen Timar? I have. He wasn't someone you dared to stop. What happened to all your boasting? Don't tell me you're scared now that you really have to fight. Jin's horribly childish provocations were a gamble. The truly powerful don't hold back their words. When they want to speak, they do so only after subduing the opponent. That's what all the transcendent masters Jin had known did. Siren, Talaris, Luna, Owl, Misha, among others. For them, conversation was a procedure that only followed after beating the other person to death or completely subjugating them through intimidation. In contrast, provocation is something done when you don't have as much power or when you need to resort to a trick. In that sense, the leader of Kinsalo's approach was not that of the transcendent masters. They acted as if they would only agree to fight if Murakin attacked first. Just like a man who had a trap prepared and waiting. Alright, it seems we're going to have a session of charlatan psychotherapy since you've been making random comments about Murakin's memory before. This time, let me take a look into your mind. You came here to save those three and set some kind of hidden trap for them. But you're starting to get quite anxious because it doesn't seem like we're falling for the trap. Ha ha ha. What's so funny, asshole? Tell me I'm wrong. You didn't think this would be so easy, did you? Come on, answer me. Jean even went a step further. But the leader of Kinsalo didn't attack. They just stared at Jean intently. Obviously, Jean could tell that now the ball was entirely in his court. But the leader of Kinsalo's face was too faint to read. Jean didn't know if they were highly embarrassed or highly content. That was a nasty blow. You're right, Jean Runcandle. You got almost everything right. You see, right now I'm not in a condition to take on both of you, not when I don't have bones in this body. Then hold on for a few more minutes. Let me figure out what this trap of yours is, and then I'll crush you myself. Don't forget I said almost everything. Click, click, click. Metal pieces instantly came together right in front of him. The metal pieces appeared out of thin air. They soon formed a sword. It wasn't an aura sword. It actually formed a real sword. The sword of the leader of Kinslow flew towards the mages. El leader. Cuff. Chuck. The sword covered the distance in an instant and severed Suzanne Lalista's head. Her head hit the ground, unable to finish the sentence she had started. She could only look at the leader with pitiful eyes. Then, the sword plunged into Chuckin's chest and twisted after doing so. Not even the Master of Defenses could block an attack in such a state, especially if the attack came from their own master. I'm sorry, I can't save all of you. Chukan fell forward and met his death. Then, metal pieces appeared out of thin air once again, instantly forming a door, just as it had created a sword before. The door opened to reveal a dark space. The leader intended to escape into it with Joe. The leader couldn't afford to lose Joe, and Joe understood this as well. That was why he had convinced himself that the leader would come to save him as long as he survived. I hope our next encounter will be more pleasant. The door closed after the leader went through it. The metal pieces forming the door instantly dissipated into smoke. Chapter 242. Individual Study, Group Study, 7. The door opened to the land of the Semi-Orcs. It was the residence of the great warrior of the White Wolf Men, Barak Sidliker, and the headquarters of the Kinslow. Leader! Dear leader, my lord! The leader and Joe stepped out of the door. The humans and half-men immediately bowed their heads. Several half-men also rushed forward and helped the leader up, followed by a series of sighs. They were relieved that the leader had returned safe and sound with Joe. Joe, you better remember our leader's grace even after your own death. Why should our leader risk his poor condition and such danger to save someone like you? Barak stared at Joe with murderous eyes. Joe didn't dare to meet his gaze and simply lowered his head. The fact that the leader of Kinslow had to come all the way to Old Otyrium was a terrible event. There were no signs of movement from more threatening factions like Zippel and Runcandle, so no one had expected Jean and Murakin to launch an assault on the Dark Magic Guild's base. Things would have been different if only Chukan and Suzanne were in the area. But Joe, the key person to complete the Illuminators, was also in the base. Joe's death would only delay the development of the Illuminators, which would also postpone the completion of their grand objective. Therefore, the leader had to risk the danger and rescue him, as the leader was the only one among them with teleportation abilities for their urgent need. Don't be too angry at him, Barak. We both returned safely, the leader said. Dear leader, you must prioritize your health, even if it means some delays to the grand objective. For the sake of all our comrades who have placed all their hopes in you, at the very least. I will do so, but there I came across quite amusing information. What kind of information? Bammel. He was actually the youngest son of the Runcandles. I wonder if Zippel and Vermont are aware of this fact. What? A man shouted in pure shock at the leader's words. It was Kinslow's vice chief, Bishkal Iviliano. Vice chief, what's the matter? This placid character's exaggerated response made all eyes turn to him. It's nothing, really. But what a surprise, boss. To think Jean Runcandle was actually Bammel. From what I saw through Joe's eyes, he not only wields the magic and power of legends, but he is also Soderet's contractor. He has broken his oath with Zippel. It seems the Runcandles have decided to wage total war against the Zippel. We must also start our preparations. Apart from Jean, no one in the world knew as much about the power of legends as the leader of Kinslow. Bishkal could hardly calm his heart. The fact that he had fought against Bouvard at the party, and the reason he had visited the sculpture workshop many months ago, were they all intentional approaches? Because he knew about Bouvard and me? But when and how? Chills and cold sweat ran down his spine. It was impossible to think that Jean had unearthed their identities on his own. The information must have come from the Runcandle clan, who must have given the order to Jean. They must have known that all their flagbearers had our spies, and that's why they ordered their reserve flagbearer, Jean, to investigate our activities. They must have guessed that we wouldn't pay as much attention to their reserve flagbearers. Bishkel's imagination took flight immediately. He gritted his teeth. He thought he was to blame for everything, and that he should have placed a spy on Jean the moment Bouvard and Jean kept meeting. That's what he should have done as the vice chief. The last encounter was especially suspicious. Jean had acted blatantly strange when he came to the sculpture workshop and requested a duel with him, using Bouvard as an excuse. He had made extremely bold statements and actions to grab Bishkel's attention. At that time, Bishkel had interpreted it as the pubescent phase of a young swordsman, but now he understood why Jean had acted that way. Yes, right after Jean left that day, I started discussing the return of the compass with Bouvard. That's when I felt a faint movement. The reason Jean had gone to such lengths to catch my attention was to plant someone who could listen to my conversations in the sculpture workshop. He also remembered how that day he had gone over all the details with Bouvard regarding the return of the compass. The memory of how he had whispered every last ultra-secret detail, including the place and time of its return and the fact that their alliance with Zippel was officially terminated. And on the first day of June, Bammel, the man who had just revealed himself as Jean Runcandle, had arrived in the Bellard feudal states, which were supposed to be the secret meeting place of Zippel and Kinslow officers. After their failed attempt to retrieve the compass, countless emergency meetings had been held within Kinslow, and even more investigations and punishments had been carried out in an effort to find out who had leaked the information. Bishkel felt as if his entire body was completely drained of blood. He had to bear the responsibility. "Dear leader, I have something to—" Bishkel was about to say it in a weak voice. "Oh, damn it all!" Suddenly, the leader slapped his forehead with his hand as he gasped. "What's wrong, leader? I left it there. Damn it. Things were so bad that I forgot to bring it with me. I can't believe I made such a mistake." "What are you talking about? Oh wait, it can't be." The leader lowered his head at Barak's question and let out a sigh. "The final version of the devastating blazing flame orb. The legacy of Ryal Zippel that we kept at the Dark Magic Guild's base. I didn't bring it with me. Joe, perhaps you were able to bring it with you? Please tell me you did." "Oh, that, leader. I was in a hurry too." "You useless idiot. Joe, you're supposed to be the head of the Dark Magic Guild. How could you forget something like that? Should our leader think of every little thing for you?" Barak showed his murderous eyes again after grabbing Joe by the collar. "Great warrior Barak, let me down. We can talk about this. I tried to bring it with me, but my hand was forced. Are you kidding me right now? I'm so furious. I'm about to explode. Karg. Hey, someone get this worm off my face and make sure I don't see him for the time being because I might kill him if I keep looking at him. Kak. Zaz. Barak threw Joe to the ground and immediately lifted his foot. He wanted to crush Joe's skull. He was so angry. "Oh no. Great warrior. Lord Great Warrior. Our leader has done everything possible to save you and bring you back. Please, control yourself." Joe's head was spared from becoming a smashed watermelon thanks to the other half-men who jumped in to stop Barak. The great wolf man was unable to contain his anger and continued to smoke with fury, even after launching an attack of rage. "This is a great loss. I have lost a precious card that could have been used against the Zippel. It's even more frustrating because I am planning to meet with Kiliak soon to negotiate the final version of the devastating blazing flame orb. Damn it! These humans, they never get anything right. Damn it!" Barak's gaze fell on Bishkel, who remained frozen. "Of course, that doesn't include you, Vice Chief. If these human worms had even a quarter of your qualities, I would never have felt so frustrated. You are all humans, but how can you be so different?" The leader nodded, his eyes fixed on Joe as he was being dragged away by the other half-men. Bishkel felt his heart about to burst. "This incident is partly my fault as well, and there is nothing we can do about it. The damage has already been done, so we must find ways to control it. Barakt, send the swiftest half-men to Oterium. There may be a chance that the brat, Jean, didn't take the magic tome. It is highly unlikely that he knows the magic tome is there, so let's keep our hopes on that. Yes, dear leader. I will have them sent immediately. Bishkal, you will be in charge of Karl Zippel from now on. If we cannot retrieve the magic tome, we will have to use it as a negotiation tool. Bishkal nodded. And didn't you say you also had something to tell me, Bishkal? In the brief instant their eyes met, 1,000 thoughts crowded Bishkal's mind. Was it the right decision to admit his own mistakes in such a dangerous climate? He found his answer in what the leader had mentioned 10 seconds ago. The damage has already been done, so we must find ways to control it. It will be of no use if I admit and reveal my error. For now, we must extinguish the urgent fires threatening Kinselo. Bishkal fought against the weight of his conscience and spoke. I wanted to talk to you about the Holy Kingdom. That boy, Jean, might expose the Oterium incident to bring the biological golem experiments to the surface. For the run candles, it would be their best excuse to intervene in the current situation of the Holy Kingdom. Oh yes, nothing less from our vice chief. You're right, they will definitely try to use it to their political advantage. That's what humans do best, isn't it? That makes sense. He wasn't an ordinary reserve flag bearer. He may coordinate with the Sword Garden to escalate the incident. What do you think we should do? I think his abrupt assault on Oterium may have been at the request of the remaining loyal forces of the Holy Kingdom. In the process, he may have discovered that the kingdom is divided under the influence of both the Zippel and us. Go on. From the Run Candle's perspective, they would prefer to drive the Zippel out of the Holy Kingdom before us. We are too anonymous in the public knowledge for them to attempt to drive out both factions. Therefore, no one would believe them even if the Run Candles claimed that we were conducting biological golem experiments. Are you suggesting that Jean might blame the Zippel for the biological golem experiments? Yes, you're right, especially since it has already been reported that the Zippel were conducting biological experiments in Kalin. I think we should observe the progress from a distance and play along. If it goes as I think it would, I know it's frustrating, but we must support his claims if we want to maintain control over half of the Holy Kingdom. This was precisely why Barakt appreciated Bishkal and found it difficult to manipulate him at will. Such sincere words and a deep understanding of motives. It soothed the anger that Joe had caused in him. The vice chief is right. It's ridiculous how we have to play along once again. But we have no choice. It seems to be the best option. Let's wait and see how Jean wants to play this. Patreon for advanced chapter. Patreon.com/levelingOdysseor. Meanwhile, Jean and Murakin continued to stare at the still-burning blue flames in the area with lost looks in their eyes. What was that steel door? Did they really escape? Did they really teleport? They were about to ask the same questions. But a bright white light shone amidst the blue flames and caught their attention. Since neither of them knew the abilities of the Kinselo leader, they naturally thought it was an offensive spell, or a trap that he had left behind. But it was none of that. The light took the form of an ordinary shield barrier. Jin's eyes widened in surprise, and he quickly ran towards the light. It was the final version of the devastating blazing flame orb. The magic tome that Misha had told him to find was emitting its light amidst the blue flames. The light surrounding the magic tome was a protective spell, placed by the matriarch of the Zippel 2 generations ago, in case their magic tome was ever damaged or lost. It's going to burn. Murakin, do something about the blue flame, Jean shouted. Murakin quickly leaped and rolled over the flames, near the magic circle. Ouch, it's so hot. It was a pity that some of his hair got burned, but thanks to his effort, Jean secured the magic tome before its protective barrier burned down. Chapter 243. Individual Study, Group Study 8. These flames are as unpleasant as their master. I almost went bald, Murakin complained as he gathered a handful of shadow energy and brushed his hair. Surprisingly, the burned hair absorbed the shadow energy and returned to its original state. Why did you put out the fire with your body instead of using shadow energy? Jean asked. Good question. Why did I do that? I guess I was in a hurry. Damn it. Ah well, thanks anyway. You just did something that will be remembered forever in the history of magic, even if I'm the only witness to it. If someone offers to write your biography in the future, make sure to tell them to include this anecdote. Of course, it was the final version of the devastating blazing flame orb. Jin's eyes gleamed as he held the magic tome. In his past life, Valeria had introduced him to all kinds of rare magic tomes. In his current life, he even inscribed Chunmi's and Kittard Hall's magic tomes into his body. But Ryal Zippel's legacy was, quite literally, the greatest masterpiece in the history of magic. Not only was he the greatest of his time, but whenever someone talked about the greatest magicians of all time, Ryal Zippel always made the list, and this was his greatest masterpiece. As a mage, one could not live a happier moment than this. Jean wished he could open it and check its contents immediately, but he decided to keep it hidden under his coat for now. Jean barely had time to celebrate. He heard a low groan. Earth. It was Chukan told her. Unlike Suzanne, who had her neck cleanly cut, Chukan somehow managed to survive. The secret move of extreme defensive magic had released a shield barrier when the leader's sword pierced his body, protecting his heart. But when they reached him, it was clear he wouldn't survive. The shield barrier had only prolonged his life briefly. He had a purple face and was quickly turning into a corpse. Jean asked him the most typical question a victor could ask after the battle was over and the winner and loser were clearly decided. Chukan told her, "Do you have any last words?" There was a dark and deep resentment in his eyes as bloody foam escaped from his mouth. It was not surprising. He met his end. By the sword of the very lord he had served, in the face of his enemy. My magic tome, he stammered as he spoke, but Jean could guess what he was desperately trying to say. Like Ryal, he wanted to leave behind his legacy. No mage in the world wanted their life's work to disappear into history in vain. And since he was dying by betrayal, he would hand over his magic tome to the enemy if it was the last resort. Where is it? Safe. Eternal. Locklava, Virginia. The third room of the Eternal Safe, password Locklava. With those as his last words, Chukan embraced death. Jean closed the eyelids over the dead man's dark, dazed eyes. The third room of the Eternal Safe? It seems it was highly valued. Well, it was quite a powerful defensive magic, I admit, Murakan said, shrugging. Neither Jean nor Murakan felt any sympathy for Chukan for entrusting them with his magic tome. It was unlikely that this was the only experiment he had conducted on civilians. Therefore, they thought Chukan should be grateful to them for allowing him to say his last words. Let's go. They quickly entered the destroyed castle. They had to return to the Holy Kingdom with Murtual and the survivors in order to conclude what had happened today and prepare for the next battle. The Kinsalo learned about my identity, and I don't even have a clue who their leader is. Is he a demon? As Murakan suggested. The ability to conjure metal was unheard of. The ability to form a sword, okay, maybe that was possible. But teleportation was unimaginable. The leader seemed to have lived for at least 1,000 years. No, maybe he had lived for an even longer period. He might have even existed when the legends ruled the world. Their leader must be the one behind the effort to recreate the legends. He also knows about my brothers. The reason he only took Joe with him is probably because he is a key person in the recreation of them. In addition to that, he was somehow related to Timar. Murakan definitely showed a strange reaction when their leader claimed that it was Murakan who went into overload, not Timar. He seemed stunned, like a person facing a past he didn't want to remember. Jean had also asked Murakan why he had fought against Timar several times before, and on each occasion, Murakan didn't seem willing to talk about it. So Jean stopped asking him. He would tell me himself if there was something I needed to know regarding Timar. Jean was lost in his thoughts as they entered the castle. It was now much more damaged than a while ago, which was obviously caused by Murakan's ruthless attacks. They moved the broken stone pieces, piled up in heaps, and headed towards the laboratory and Murtual. The laboratory had been ravaged by detonation spells. Not a single facility related to the experiments remained intact. Everything was in ruins, making it much more difficult to find the trapdoor to the secret passage. Mertual Sela. We're here. Over here. It wasn't Mertual. They heard the unfamiliar voices of a group of men in the distance. Jean and Murakan moved the rubble to find the source of the sound and tore open the ground. Once the secret passage was uncovered, the first thing they saw were the frightened and tearful faces of the survivors, and the mana insertion device that Jean had moved, and Mertual, who had her eyes closed and her hands peacefully folded on her chest. The saint has saved us and returned to Ayula's embrace. Please, take the body of our saint back to the Holy Kingdom with us. She had squeezed out the last of her life force to insert mana into her people and headed into Ayula's embrace. She had completed her mission as a saint. Perhaps she knew from the beginning that she would die if she wanted to save them. That's why she desperately asked me to wait here. She was not an ordinary healer. She was a saint. But there was a good reason why she died trying to save them. There were traces of experiments all over her body, like the light heart protruding from her torso, a golemized arm, or a tail on her backside. They could hardly be considered ordinary human beings anymore. As they were on the verge of transformation, she had to pour all her life force into the mana insertion device if she wanted to save them. They asked us to give this to you, saying that it must be delivered to His Majesty. Jean took off his cloak and covered his body. One of the survivors handed him a book and pendant. It was Mertual's pendant, and the book was a diary. She had been recording everything that happened in this place since she infiltrated the Dark Magic Guild as a spy by order of the Holy King. Every day. Please leave. Let's go back now. Patreon for advanced chapter. Patreon.com/levelingodiswar. It was the last day of the Manifestation Festival. The sun shone over Vanquila's capital as if Ayula herself was blessing the scene. A giant carriage of pure white stood in the middle of the crowded city square. The fake Miklin and Lani stood on top of the carriage, waving to the people. 30 holy knights of the Golden Shield surrounded the carriage to protect it, and a procession of saints followed behind. This in itself was a great attraction for those who had come to the Holy Kingdom to witness the Manifestation Festival. The city square was literally packed with people, and there was no room to move. Citizens and nobles from various kingdoms and the people of the Holy Kingdom had gathered to receive the consecration of the Holy King. Everyone eagerly awaited the start of the ceremony. Your Holy Majesty! Your Majesty! Seeing the Holy King in person was an overwhelming experience for many. They were overwhelmed with emotion and shouted at the top of their lungs, especially the citizens suffering from illnesses. For the sick and the poor, the consecration ceremony of the Holy King was a great opportunity and a great hope to prolong their lives. The consecration had the power to heal diseases. But since the powers of the Holy King were limited, not many were fortunate enough to receive the consecration during the Manifestation Festival. Only about 50 people received the true consecration each year through the divine powers of the Holy King. The rest were simply blessed with words. These blessings had no practical impact on the fate or life of each individual. But still, many were desperate to receive the words of the king. The king stopped waving and lowered his hand. The city square fell silent immediately. Dear children of Ayula, and guests who have come from all corners of the world to see me, I express my gratitude. I am the Holy King Miklin. The crowd cheered. As in the consecration ceremonies of all the previous years, it will be my precious daughter, Lani Salome, who will read today's consecration message on behalf of the voice of this old man. I ask for applause for my daughter, who will have to pray tomorrow with a sore throat. The fake Holy King patted Lani's shoulder and showed his affection for his daughter. Lani took the fake Holy King's arm and smiled happily. The fake king was perfectly imitating the real Miklin, who always humbled himself and loved his daughter like no one else. There was a loud applause. Lani began the consecration message once the cheers died down. We will begin the consecration ceremony of His Majesty the Holy King. Once the carriage starts moving, please follow us in an orderly manner to avoid any injuries or accidents. As in most ceremonies of this kind, the people who received the true consecration through sacred power were already predetermined, although not many people knew this fact. The carriage advanced and briefly stopped at the locations where the people destined for consecration were gathered. At each stop, the Holy King stepped down from the carriage to kiss their foreheads and bless them while Lani read the consecration message. May Ayula's will, heart, and love be with you. The true consecration was granted to about 40 people without major issues. The crippled began to walk after the consecration, and the blind began to see a new light. The spectators, moved by the miracles that occurred, began to cry. It was then that a group of Vankalans dressed in robes emerged from the crowd and blocked the path of the carriage. They were not among the chosen ones. Your Majesty! Your Majesty! Listen to our stories. The crowd started booing. Such intrusions were common every year during the consecration ceremonies, so they didn't pay much attention to it. The Holy King smiled mercifully at the intruders. Lani whispered in his ear, "Bless them, Father. You also stepped down from the carriage for those who interrupted last year. Remember?" The fake Holy King nodded. At that moment, he and the Zippel clan decided that Lani had completely surrendered and had started playing along. They also considered it the result of the continued mental torture while she was held captive by Vitura. The Holy King stepped down from the carriage and met with them. "Yes, children of Ayula, how burdensome was your pain that you sought me out. Please, tell me your stories." Those who interrupted the procession raised their bowed heads. "Your Majesty, we..." They raised their heads and removed their robes, revealing the grotesque bodies that bore the traces of biological experiments. "Heavens! What the hell is that?" "No!" The spectators who caught a glimpse of the horrifying sight gasped and screamed. The fake Holy King shuddered and realized something was wrong. Lani bit her lower lip and averted her gaze. She tried not to burst into tears as she looked at Vitura, who returned her gaze with an expressionless face. The 30 holy knights of the Golden Shield guarding the carriage also clenched their teeth and looked at Vitura. "They dragged us into the laboratories against our will and turned us into this state. Who did this to you?" The fake Holy King did his best to remain calm. Things would only get worse if he let panic take over. They responded, "The head of the Holy Knights, Vitura. He sold us to the Zippel's experimentation chambers. He turned us into this." "Shut your mouth, Xing." Vitura unsheathed his sword as he shouted. Lani couldn't take her eyes off him. She tried her best not to cry. Chapter 244. Villain 1. The events unfolded like this on the previous night. "Lani, you must frame me." That was the first thing Vitura said when Jean returned to the Holy Kingdom with the survivors. He devised a way to swiftly and flawlessly rid the Holy Kingdom of invaders and traitors while Jean was away. No, devising wouldn't be the right word. He had resolved to do so with determination. "Lord Vitura, what do you mean all of a sudden?" "Lord Jean has brought us witnesses and evidence. And right now, more eyes are watching the land than ever before due to the Manifestation Festival. This is an opportunity we will never have again. If we want to eradicate them once and for all, we need a villain to bear the blame." "Are you joking?" Lani asked with a trembling voice. But Vitura shook his head. "No, I have already made up my mind. Why do you have to do this? We have undeniable witnesses and the record from the Holy Society of the Dawn Carriage that martyred herself in suffering. There's no need for you to go down with them, Sir Vitura. We have enough already." "Those are wishful words, Lani Salome. Did you truly believe it would be so easy to reclaim the kingdom from a giant clan that has the world under their control? Did you think that would be enough? And why not? Whether it's the Zippel clan or Kinselo, or no matter how powerful they may be, how can they deny the state of the survivors that will be revealed to the world? And if Lord Jean is correct, the Zippel clan will undoubtedly act accordingly, if only for the sake of Karl Zippel and Dash. Of course, Lord Jin's assistance alone would be enough to give them trouble. But what will happen afterwards? They will pull out a few key individuals as scapegoats and devour this land once again like pests. Even if that happens, I can't let you be branded a traitor, Sir Vitura. That is unacceptable. Silence followed. Lonnie's anxious breath was more noticeable in the absence of sound. Lonnie Salome, what do you think the Holy Kingdom needs right now? Lonnie couldn't answer. The kingdom needs a leader. Someone to help them believe that the Holy Kingdom is not yet finished. They need a symbol of hope. We need a leader to arise at this moment. One who will punish the traitors in front of everyone and proclaim that the Holy Kingdom should only be ruled by the children of Ayula. And you're telling me to assume that role? Yes, Sai. I understand what you mean. If that's the case, then you should mark me as the traitor and become the leader, Sir Vitura. Lonnie, let's be frank. If we're going to compare the two of us, I haven't contributed anything to this land. All I did was receive the love of your people solely for being the daughter of the Holy King. What right do I have to lead the people? I have no such capacity. My dear friend, Miklin. He adopted you to raise you as the Holy Queen from the very beginning. My father has never mentioned anything like that to me. I can swear on the name of Ayula. Miklin received the prophecy from Ayula that you will become the Holy Queen. What do you mean by that? Take a look at this. Vitura pulled out a notebook from his inner pocket. It was Miklin's diary. There was not a single mention of governance and state in the diary. It only contained his personal feelings and religious reflections. Somewhere in the middle of the pages, there was an anecdote related to Lonnie and Ayula's prophecy. Lonnie sighed. It was impossible to mistake Miklin's handwriting. So, if you can't accept my words, then take it as the will of Ayula and accept it. You have always obeyed Ayula's word better than anyone else. Even if our God himself has chosen me, this is not right. This cannot be. I am already well known as the longtime advocate for the Zippel clan, and indeed I have pretended to do their bidding for a long time. Overthrow me, and with that, show them that Ayula's volcano still grows strong. There must be another way, Sir Vitura. It was much harder for Lonnie to accept this plan because she had always disliked Vitura before the Holy King was kidnapped. In her eyes, Vitura was not a loyal subject of the kingdom. He was the first to defect to the side of the Zippel clan, the greatest political enemy of her father, and a plague to the Holy Kingdom. But in reality, Vitura was a friend of Miklin like no other and the most loyal of men who volunteered to play the villain and keep watch over his enemies inside and outside the kingdom. Lonnie could never thank him or earn his forgiveness enough even if she had her whole life to repay it. But to ask him to allow her to continue playing the villain and bear such a heavy burden to the end? I can't do it, Sir Vitura. No, you can. In fact, you should be the one to come to your senses here. You also know that there is no better way, don't you? Even Lord Jean, who has no affiliation with us, fought a difficult battle for the sake of the Holy Kingdom. Ending me is not difficult compared to what he has done for us. But who will know of his sacrifice besides us? Instead, they will only point and jeer at you. Your name will go down in history as a horrible traitor. Must we desire rewards for doing good, seek reputation for defending our beliefs, or calculate our gains when choosing martyrdom? Ayula and the great saints have never taught such lessons. But, Lonnie Salome, stop acting like a child. Don't disappoint me any further. Endure your suffering as I do. Don't mock my determination out of fear of minor hardships. Lonnie eventually dropped to the ground and broke into tears. She clutched her chest in frustration, banged her head on the ground, and screamed. At that moment, Jean and Murakin saw Lonnie's body glow with its own light. It was so brief that they almost thought it was an illusion. Vitura patted her back and then turned his gaze to Jean. Jean and Murakin did not interrupt their conversation. While they listened, they also racked their brains to see if there was a better solution than the one Vitura had proposed. If they found one, they would mention it. Unfortunately, Vitura's sacrifice was clearly the most powerful way to stabilize the Holy Kingdom. Jean was only an unrelated outsider. Nevertheless, Jean also thought that Vitura's sacrifice was tragic. For his own sake, it would have been much better for him to seek asylum in Huffister after exposing the truth or fully side with the Zippel clan once and for all. But it would be a great disrespect to neglect the determination of this man with unwavering will. Lord Jean. Yes, Servitura? I am indebted to you in a great way that I cannot repay. I will never forget what you have done for the Holy Kingdom, even in my death. Unlike you, I have only done it with the promise of a future reward. Nevertheless, it hasn't been easy. Servitura? Yes, please speak. I will ensure that your family can live a peaceful life in Huffister. If Vitura's plan succeeded, Lani would have no power to protect her family. It would not be right for the Holy Queen to take care of a traitor's family. But Vitura's family would definitely not survive without external help. The Zippel clan would never let them live after their great loss. The people of the Holy Kingdom would show Ayula's mercy and refrain from throwing stones at them, but they certainly wouldn't volunteer to protect a traitor's family. I wanted to express my gratitude, but here I am, indebted to you once again. I am a martial artist born and raised in the Garden of Swords. Please take it as my show of respect to a great martial artist. Patreon for advanced chapter. Patreon.com/levelingodiswer. What are these horrible heretics blaspheming about? Society of Creed. Guardians, bring them down once and for all. Vitura shouted with anger in his voice. The entire square fell silent at his disproportionate response. Everyone felt that something was amiss. There were 10 subjects who had clearly been subjected to biological experiments. The head of the Creed Guardians was too eager to label them as heretics, and there was shock and horror on the face of the fake Holy King. All these things added up to the suspicion that quickly grew in people's minds. Clunk, clunk, clunk. The sacred knights of the Creed Guardians standing by Vitura immediately formed a formation. People stood in front of Vitura and the sacred knights to block their path. The knights forcefully pushed them aside and made their way forward. Your Majesty, they are all heretics. Please stay away from them. Golden Shield Knights, why don't you take action? Keep the heretics away from your Majesty. The Golden Shield Knights did not move at Vitura's command. They stood guard around the carriage. The fake Holy King couldn't hide his panic. Lani took the initiative, glaring at Vitura and shouted loudly, "Why do you label them as heretics, Commander-in-Chief? And how dare you draw your sword before His Majesty gives the order? Stand down." Everyone gathered in the square knew about the political disputes between the Holy King and Vitura. Naturally, Vitura seemed like a Ziefel's lapdog desperately trying to cover up the incident. I am the Commander-in-Chief of the Sacred Knights. The right to judge heretics lies with me. If you have eyes to see, Lani Salome, take a look at them. Do those horrible beings appear as ordinary humans to you? It is clear that they have faced demons. That must be decided by His Majesty. Your Majesty, please order Sir Vitura to stand down. Although the fake Holy King had Bouvard's help in transforming, he belonged to the Zippel clan, not the Kinslow clan. Therefore, he didn't know how to respond. Your Majesty, I have told you many times, they are heretics. We must subdue them before they further tarnish the reputation of the Holy Kingdom and proceed with the consecration ceremony. Sir Vitura, if you beat around the bush, you will be considered a heretic as well, Lani Salome. Get out of my way. Make way. Vitura and the sacred knights of the Creed Guardians headed towards the survivors. When they were close enough, the Golden Shield Knights drew their swords and stood in their way. Do not come any closer, Sir Vitura. How dare you? You are under my direct command. How dare you stand in my way? Under his direct command. Unlike the ones brought down when Vitura met Jean, these 30 Golden Shield Knights had remained loyal to the kingdom. Their hearts felt heavy like a man cutting his own tongue when they had to raise their swords against Vitura. Drawing a weapon without His Majesty's order itself constitutes treason. Sheathe your weapon immediately, Commander-in-Chief. Ching. Vitura fiercely swung his sword against the Golden Shield Knights. Immediately, the Creed Guardians also began attacking and blood splattered. Vitura lunged at the survivors like a demon possessed, as if he could handle the aftermath of the incident with ease as long as he killed them. Vitura and 50 Creed Guardians Knights, against Lani and 30 Golden Shield Knights. It seemed like the battle would end in a draw, but Vitura soon displayed formidable skills befitting his position as Commander-in-Chief. He forcefully pushed back the Golden Shield Knights and approached the survivors. Heretics! I will have your heads. The 10 survivors gathered and closed in around the fake Holy King as Vitura approached. Everything had been planned in advance. After a few seconds, the 10 survivors yelled and surrounded the fake Holy King. Lonnie stood in front of the king, and, of course, it was Vitura who reached Lonnie first. The Golden Shield Knights fought desperately to prevent the Creed Guardians from reaching Lonnie. Lonnie's eyes met Vitura's. It seemed like they were glaring at each other, but in their hearts, there was only sympathy. Lonnie, you too are a heretic, lass. Your punishment will be fulfilled in due time. Majesty, your majesty, I am here. Vitura has come to save you from the heretics. Clang. Lonnie's and Vitura's swords clashed. The choreographed sword exchange they had practiced all night began. All Lonnie had to do was dodge and block his attacks, but Vitura had to deflect her while pretending to attack the survivors, all while making his way towards the fake Holy King. Every time Lonnie stopped Vitura's sword, it felt like he was comforting her with the sword. Everything will be fine. Everything will be fine, Lonnie. Vitura's thrust sent Lonnie flying through the air and rolling on the ground. At that moment, the fake Holy King, the survivors, and Vitura were only 2 steps away. Vitura passed by Lonnie and stabbed his sword again with madness radiating from his eyes. What followed made it seem like Vitura had made a terrible mistake. Vitura's sword pierced the fake Holy King's neck. He trembled as if unable to believe the mistake he had just made. Still, he tried to swing his sword towards the survivors once again. But before he could do so, Lonnie stood up. Her sword quickly approached Vitura's neck. Chapter 245. Villain 2. The sound of a sword piercing a neck was heard. It was followed by a dull thud. Vitura's head fell to the ground. Lonnie stood frozen in the same motion she had finished swinging her sword. Her head was tilted. It had only been a second, not even half of it. But the brief moment after completing the motion felt like an eternity to Lonnie. Oh, Sir Vitura. She wished this eternity would never pass. She wished everything would come to a complete halt. Because now she would have to mourn the horrific puppet of the Zippel clan. Not the man who had gloriously sacrificed himself for the children of Ayula. Hot blood splattered Vitura's neck onto his face. Some droplets fell into his eyes. Blood and tears ran down his eyelids. Father! Lonnie cried out with a hoarse voice as she looked at the fake Holy King. But her cry had actually been for the true Holy King, Miklin, who was probably in Ayula's embrace now. Father, Father! No, this can't be happening. This can't be happening. Father, why is this happening? Lonnie lunged forward and embraced the fake Holy King. She immediately began her sacred healing spells, but the damage to the fake Holy King's neck was beyond any human effort. Undoubtedly, Vitura had ended him for good. The crown of the dormant volcano lay on the ground, completely drenched in blood. Amidst the clash of swords, the grunts and shouts of the holy knights, and the gasps of the anxious crowd, Lonnie's desperate cry stood out above all. Both loyal knights and traitors, as well as the people, felt a dreadful premonition at Lonnie's cry. It didn't matter whether they knew the Holy King was a double or not. Death shook them all. Your Majesty, the king has fallen. It was Commander-in-Chief Vitura Velter. Your Majesty was... Holy Ones, heal your Majesty immediately. It was one of the captains of the Creed Guardians who had sought out the saints. He knew the Holy King was dead. He had only shouted because the saints in the procession were also Zippel's puppets. Now that Vitura and the fake Holy King were dead, there was only one way out for those who had sided with the Zippel. They had to secure the survivors of the biological golem experiment at all costs. If they couldn't get rid of the most crucial evidence that troubled the Zippel, there was no way they would escape their involvement in the Holy King's death. The entire world had witnessed the death of the Holy King. Therefore, the Zippel could only offer to protect those who would play a crucial role in cleaning up this mess. Out of my way, out of my way. We must tend to His Majesty. The saints in the procession behind the carriage started joining the battlefield. But this only added to the chaos of the crowd that had just witnessed the murder of the fake Holy King. In front of Lonnie, a battle unfolded between the Golden Shield Knights and the Creed Guardian Society. Creed Guardians. Capture all the heretics. It was then that Lonnie ceased portraying her grief with the fake Holy King in her arms. Golden Shield Knights. You must not hand them over to the Creed Guardians. There must be a reason why Vitura and the Creed Guardians wanted them dead, even at the cost of high treason. Lonnie Salome, did you say treason? His Majesty was attacked because you couldn't protect him, lass. How dare you accuse us of treason, you cursed witch. Golden Shield Knights. Follow the orders of Lonnie Salome. Stop the traitors. Protect the holy subjects around Lonnie. The loyal Golden Shield Knights re-established their formation. These men were handpicked by Vitura. Their solidarity was notable, even through the horrific chaos. Golden Shields, look at yourselves. Your current actions are the very definition of treason. Leaving aside the heretics, shouldn't you at least make way for the saints to tend to His Majesty? His Majesty may still be alive. If he dies due to lack of treatment, all of you should. His Majesty has perished due to the covert attack by Vitura Velter. All those who followed his orders, including yourselves, will pay for the death of His Majesty the King. Bring them down. Despite being outnumbered, the Golden Shield Knights overwhelmed the Creed Guardians. However, the Golden Shield Knights couldn't help but feel anxious. A tremor began to spread from the outskirts of the city square. A group of heavily armored knights headed towards them on horseback. It was an understandable response, given the extreme nature of the circumstances. And naturally, they were all pawns of Zephyl. Kid, Murican whispered to Jean. Both of them were in the midst of the crowd. Yes. Should we intervene if the religious fanatic side is pushed back? If anything happens to her, not only would my promise to help be in vain, but Vitura's sacrifice would also be in vain. That will never happen, Jean said. How can the religious fanatics stop them all? They can't. If there's no one left in the Holy Kingdom to help Lonnie. At the end of Jin's sentence, another group of Sacred Knights and Creed Guardians troops arrived at the scene. There were at least 100 Sacred Knights, and quite a long row of soldiers marched in to control the people. Kill the traitors and capture Lonnie Salome and the heretics, shouted the newly arrived captain. The Sacred Knights swiftly charged in wedge formations, and the soldiers pushed back the crowd with the shafts of their spears. But the people would never accept this. Even an idiot could tell that the Creed Guardians were the traitors. If it were simply a clash between the Creed Guardian Society and the Golden Shield Knights, the people would have had a different opinion. But the murder of the fake Holy King by Vitura played a decisive role. We must protect His Majesty's daughter. You won't take Lady Lonnie away. You have already harmed His Majesty. Don't you dare lay a finger on Lady Lonnie, you filthy Zipple pawns. Are you not ashamed before Ayula? Stop them. Stop them with your bodies. Suddenly, the people in the city square began rushing toward the battlefield. The Holy King and his daughter were always loved by the people. And in their eyes, the Creed Guardians were godforsaken bastards who murdered a father before his daughter's own eyes on a festival day. Moreover, Lonnie and the Golden Shield Knights had only acted sensibly and with common sense since the incident. But the Creed Guardians seemed shamelessly desperate to capture the survivors. Not only that, they even demanded that the Golden Shield Knights make way for them, claiming they needed to tend to the Holy King, who was clearly dead. Jean and Vitura had shared a conversation the night before. It's true that the Zipple and Kinselo have absolute control over the leadership of the Holy Kingdom, but they don't have it over the people. Thanks to their alliance breaking, they haven't been able to dull the citizens' senses at this point. Vitura said, "We'll need the Holy Kingdom subjects to identify with us," Jean responded. "I will attempt to portray the most atrocious villain they have ever seen." What Jean didn't know was that by this point in his past life, the people of the Holy Kingdom had already been dulled and brainwashed. That's why no one cared when Lonnie consumed herself. Lonnie and Vitura grew tired of their lone struggle and quietly left the Holy Kingdom, after which they disappeared. But this time, the story changed thanks to Jean. And now, the perfect conditions were in place to reveal the truth. How dare you? Don't you realize how grave a crime it is to side with the heretics? Get out of the way. Move aside. I warn you, move. The confident shouting captain of the Creed Guardians began to frown. The sacred knights of the Creed Guardians who arrived as reinforcements were blocked by a crowd of people. All the people filling the city square rushed to shield Lonnie. The soldiers who had been pushing them with their spears were being pushed back. The sacred knights could do nothing but repeat the same words over and over. "I told you, move." If it weren't for the manifestation festival, if it had been any other day, they would have pressed forward, regardless of the innocent citizens' blood spilled. But if they did it now, the consequences of such an action would have a much greater impact than the testimonies of the biological golem experiment survivors. There were too many eyes watching. Several hundred journalists from all nations were scrutinizing them as well. Killing their own people before those watching eyes was the very definition of madness. They would never recover from it, not even with the Zippel behind them. "Lady Lonnie, the Golden Shield Knights stand with you. Don't worry. Fight against them. Secure the children of Ayula who have been dragged to the Zippel clan's laboratories. Ayula herself will bring punishment down upon you." There are not many things in the world as terrifying as an enraged crowd. The sacred knights of the Creed Guardians dared not approach them. They could only look around. Lonnie was no longer crying, but there were dried marks of blood and tears around her eyes. She quickly wiped them away. Her gaze landed on Vitura's head on the ground. She had a faint smile on her face. Amidst the countless voices and noises of the city square, Lonnie slowly knelt beside the fake Holy King. "Death will take you to rest, you who toiled in the dark and heavy world. Your soul will be free in Ayula's vast embrace. All your past suffering will turn into good humor that lightens your heart." It was a whisper of prayer, but it was like a breeze of wind. Just as blades of grass kneel before the blowing wind, the people of the Holy Kingdom began to sit in their places and close their eyes. All your past suffering will turn into good humor that lightens your heart. The burden you leave behind will be carried by those like you, to become the substance of the next morning. Those who share your burden will be people like you. All the citizens of the Holy Kingdom knew this prayer. It was a sight to behold. Even outsiders were moved by the prayer. They closed their eyes and bowed their heads in condolence. The Golden Shield Knights also sheathed their weapons and knelt. Soon, the sacred knights of the Creed Guardians stopped looking around and joined the prayer. If it weren't for the steel fragments and blood on the ground, no one would have believed that a battle had taken place right here moments ago. The prayer was coming to an end when a man quietly approached Jean. "Lord Jean," he murmured. "Hello, Dino." Dino Jaglin was now a renowned young journalist. He came to the Holy Kingdom immediately at Jin's call and began writing articles. "The record left by Mertual Sela is ready to be published. I highlighted its similarities with the tragedy of Colin and focused on the real losses of the Holy Kingdom," Dino said. "Good work. Any chance the Zippel will slip away?" "None. There is too much evidence we can use to establish the involvement of the Zippel leadership. A few scapegoats won't save them. The fact that Kinslow has Karl Zippel in custody is the key point, as you said, Lord Jean." Dino gave a faint smile and continued. "This incident may well put an end to the days when people considered the Zippel clan benevolent." Chapter 246. Villain 3. The prayer initiated by Lonnie ended at midnight. Everyone gathered in the city square joined the prayer without anyone deviating from it. Meanwhile, all nations sent delegations to express their condolences for the news of the Holy King's death, and the press immediately printed bulletins reporting on the tragedy of the Holy Kingdom. People would remember this prayer as an offering for the Holy King. But Lonnie, Jean, and Murakan would mourn the death of a great sacred knight on this day in the years to come. The traitors of the Holy Kingdom who had sided with the Kinslow decided to take the Kinslow leader as their new god instead of Ayula. And the group that sided with the Zippel replaced Ayula with their reverence for the power and order of Zippel. The Runcandles had long known about the control of the two factions over the Holy Kingdom, but they had no reason or justification to intervene. If they brought down the leaders, it would be seen as an invasion. If they attacked the Zippel and the Kinslow, it was highly likely that a large-scale war would break out. The Runcandles didn't fear war itself. But if a war ever broke out, The people of the Holy Kingdom would see the Zippel as the just clan aiding the kingdom, while the Runcandles would become the crazy invaders. In such a scenario, all they could gain by striking at the Holy Kingdom would be several saints. They wouldn't win any favor from the Holy Kingdom subjects, who would end up becoming healers. Therefore, the Holy Kingdom had been a headache for the Runcandles lately. But now an opportunity presented itself. Little brother. It was Luna. The Runcandle clan had also sent a delegation to express their condolences, just like the rest of the world. As it was the death of the Holy King, the clan sent their first, second, and third flag-bearers to the Holy Kingdom, which meant Luna, Joshua, and Luncia Runcandle, respectively. Luna had received news from Kashmir and had briefly stepped away from the delegation to meet Jean. It's been a while, dear sister. You've become strong. She noticed Jin's growth at a glance. She didn't need to face him or understand the powers of the Sword of Legends or the Shadow Blade to realize it. The eyes of the strong were enough to inform the other. The last time they had seen each other, Luna had cried like a child when she was with Jean. The impact of Taemun's death felt like an entire part of her world had been erased. But now, Luna wore her imperturbable expression again. Jean knew she had fought against the pain and sense of loss to regain that expression. You've also grown stronger, dear sister. The siblings smiled at each other. I was about to complain about how much I missed you when I heard that you accomplished another tremendous feat, Sir Kashmir briefed me briefly. Well, how can I assist you? Jean pointed to a carriage parked nearby. Please take care of them. Vitura Velter's family was in the carriage, disguised as battle casualties from yesterday. I'll take care of it, Luna promptly responded. She didn't need to ask further because she had already been informed about Vitura. Her family would now join the delegation returning to Huffister. Anything else? Please stay in the Holy Kingdom until the trial for the murder of the Holy King is over, so that Joshua doesn't take the glory for my actions. Jean knew that the Zippel's reputation in the Holy Kingdom would plummet immediately once the trial began. The Holy Kingdom subjects were already furious, thanks to Vitura's sacrifice. Some even demanded an official apology from the Zippel before the Holy King's funeral even began. And it wasn't just the Holy King. The whole world would learn about the atrocities of the Zippel. The fact that the Runcandle clan's delegation stayed in the Holy Kingdom after paying their respects served as a symbol. It signaled that the Runcandles were watching the Zippel. The only clan that could deter the Zippel had its eyes on their immense strength. Since Jean was a reserve flag-bearer, he couldn't serve as a symbol. Of course, Siren, who would learn about it in a future letter, and any infiltrators would recognize Jin's work here. But someone else from the Runcandle clan had to claim the glory in the eyes of the public. And naturally, Jean wanted it to be Luna. If she stepped back to avoid any unnecessary attention, as she often did, the honor would fall to the second flag-bearer, Joshua. I was planning on doing it, of course. We can't let him take all the glory for something you've worked so hard for. No. Are you aware that Joshua also has many copies of himself? What do you mean by that? Jean began to explain Joshua's secret to her. Luna's eyes widened in surprise. She knew nothing about the seer. I knew something was off. Joshua volunteered for extremely risky missions without much thought. He could have been using his copies every time. Father must be aware of it, right? Most likely. Father knows everything that goes on within the clan. Then there must be a reason why he didn't stop it. Probably for the same reason he also overlooked your shadow energy. There isn't much to read into it. If he overlooked something that goes against principles, it can only mean he saw it as beneficial for the clan. Luna placed her hand on Jin's shoulder, as if to convey that she understood the effort it took. However, I may have to investigate it. I'll start looking into it more seriously from now on. You focus on finishing things here in the Holy Kingdom. Agreed, Luna. Until the last night of the Creed Guardian Society was detained in the underground cells the next day. The Zippel tried by all means to prevent them all from being imprisoned, but the murder of the Holy King turned out to be too decisive. It wasn't just the testimonies of the biological golem experiment survivors. The list revealed by Vitura that Lonnie exposed was impossible to cover up. Jean had requested the list of names from Vitura before heading to Old Otyrium. Please make a list of the traitors who sided with the Kinslow and the Zippel so that we can expose them as soon as I return. Lastly, gather the remaining faithful. There may be a confrontation in the process, Jean had said. Vitura made separate lists for the Kinslow and the Zippel. Lonnie kept the list of Kinslow traitors while revealing the list of Ziffel to the world. She exposed the truth about the Zippel clan. And yet, the Zippel couldn't release a statement saying that the dead Holy King was a fake and that it was the Kinslow who carried out the biological golem experiments. I can't reveal the name of the hero who rescued the survivors, but he says that the biological golem experiments were conducted in the 4th magical tower of the Zippel clan. We demand an official statement from the Zippel clan regarding the matter. Lonnie and the people were still in the city square. Although all pawns of the Zippel clan were detained, the people refused to let Lonnie and the body of the false Holy King enter the castle until everything about the incident was revealed. Apart from the Creed Guardian Society, everyone else on Vitura's list was still inside the castle, preparing for the funeral of the Holy King. It wasn't reasonable. But given the power held by the leaders of the Holy Kingdom, such as Pontiff Montiano, it was certainly feasible. Unlike the Creed Guardians, they could only be brought down if there was undeniable proof that they had sided with the Zippel. Unfortunately, Vitura's list was not decisive enough for that purpose. But, of course, Jean had expected it. We will not proceed with my father's funeral until we have an official statement from the Zippel clan. They will have to confess before we console the aggrieved spirit of my father. Master of the 4th tower, explain yourself. Explain. They could have easily ignored the cries of Lonnie and the people if they were the only ones present in the square. But delegations from around the world and countless journalists had joined them. The Zippel had to quickly come to an agreement with the Kinslow about their secret negotiation. They had to retrieve Karl in exchange for taking the blame for all the accusations. Everything was going as Jean had predicted. They preferred taking the blame over admitting the truth that they had kidnapped Karl through a third-rate terrorist group like the Kinslow. Both the reputation of justice and power were difficult to regain once lost. But the former could be mitigated to some extent with money. On the other hand, the latter required unimaginable sacrifices to regain. In the end, the Zippel clan had to issue a public statement before noon. The Zippel clan admits to getting involved in the politics of the Holy Kingdom, which led to the biological golem experiments being carried out on the kingdom's population with the assistance of officials who operated with the clan. However, we wish to inform you that the biological golem experiments are unrelated to the clan's political involvement. The experiments were conducted as an individual crime by Karl Zippel, the 4th Tower Master. Starting today, Karl Zippel will be sent to the Holy Kingdom, under magical restraints to apologize in person, after which Karl Zippel and any related personnel will be severely punished under clan law. We express our deepest condolences for the departure of the Holy King and promise the full extent of any applicable compensation. However, we will also refer to clan laws in addressing the spread of unconfirmed rumors and malicious slander. The clan's political involvement has always been limited to cases requested by officials of the Holy Kingdom and was not driven by the clan's political ambitions. We wish to inform you that the statement had an assertive tone, quite different from the usual Zippel clan style. The words themselves were polite but clearly stated that all punishments would be carried out within their own clan. Naturally, the fury of the Holy Kingdom subjects skyrocketed a moment after the journalists delivered the statement. They are intentionally trying to enrage the Holy Kingdom subjects so that Karl Zippel gets stoned to death when he arrives here to atone for his crimes. It didn't matter how or why. If Karl Zippel were to die on these lands, the Zippel could reverse the situation and hold the Holy Kingdom accountable for everything. Objective evaluation based on the common perspective of the world would never value the life of the Holy King above that of the 4th Tower Master of the Zippel clan. If a war ever broke out between the entire Holy Kingdom and the 4th magical tower of the Zippel, the tower forces would always win. So that's how much they wanted to get out of this situation, enough to give up Karl Zippel, whom they had just snatched back from the Kinslow. And I wonder how much they paid to have Karl back. The Zippel still favored the scapegoat, but it wasn't an ordinary sacrifice. The scapegoat was a pure-blooded Zippel. Unlike Myron, who was already dead when the Colin incident became known to the world, this time the Zippel blamed one of their own. If Karl died, the Holy Kingdom could no longer demand further accountability from the Zippel for the biological golem incident. The world would continue to criticize their political involvement, but time and money could resolve those matters eventually. Jean thought it was a pretty shrewd decision, except for the fact that their desperation made them commit too early, especially when they didn't know who they were dealing with. The Zippel still hadn't realized that Jean was behind Lonnie's movements. They could only assume that a Runcandle or Vermont flag-bearer was behind her. Kinslow would never share with the Zippel the information that it was Bammel who single-handedly raised the Dark Magic Guild headquarters and that Bammel was actually Jean Runcandle. Dino? Yes, Lord Jean. When Karl Zippel arrives in the Holy Kingdom, publish all the articles related to the Kinslow. That Karl was actually a hostage of the Kinslow because of Bammel until a few days ago, and that Bammel actually rescued the survivors from Old Otirium, not from the Fourth Magical Tower. Inform them that Karl is not involved in this incident. The Zippel will have to do everything possible to deny the claim. It will be quite a spectacle to see. If the Zippel didn't deny the accusation, Kiliak would be seen as a cold and ruthless man who sold his own son to rid himself of blame. Jean wasn't going to help the Zippel choose between their reputation for power or justice. He was going to make them lose both. Chapter 247, Villain 4. Given the usual circumstances, Jean would have never been able to win against the Zippel in a media coverage battle. Even if he hit them where it hurt the most, there was a huge difference in the control they had over the media. The Zippel always portrayed themselves as the good guys, and their control over the press was an impregnable fortress. But at this moment, Jean wielded so much power. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the entire world's press was gathered in the Holy Kingdom right now. Several renowned journalists had also come, including Dino. Most of them belonged to major factions like the Runcandles, Zippel, and Vermont. But some belonged to neutral news agencies. It almost feels like I'm looking at a barrel full of oil, Jean thought as he observed the journalists gathered in the city square. The oil barrel called the press would soon burst into flames when it encountered Dino's sparks, to the point where even the Zippel wouldn't be able to control it. Both the Zippel and the Kinslow, come to think of it, have always been my enemies, ever since I left Storm Castle. He suddenly remembered how he was attacked by Zippel extremists with the assistance of the Kinslow when he left Storm Castle. Perhaps the fight against them was destined from then on. Besides, he had to defeat them anyway once he reached the top of his clan. It was 3 in the afternoon. What's that? The question made the enraged crowd look into the distance in the sky. The gigantic Zippel clan's frigate, the Kozek, flew in the sky above the capital. Jean unconsciously clenched his fists tightly as he saw it. The Zippel Elite Mage Squadron, the White Knight Asterisk, and Karl Zippel were aboard the ship. Asterisk, formerly known as Twilight Mages. Kozek? Damn. What is that thing doing here again? Murakan glared as soon as he spotted the frigate. The flag-bearers of the Runcandle clan are staying in the Holy Kingdom, so the Zippel probably wanted to show off their power too. In fact, they're sending a message to the Runcandles to forget about assassinating Karl Zippel. They're here for an apology, but here they are, flaunting their power. Arrogant bastards. This reminds me of all the suffering I went through in Colin. I feel angry. If only I could crush that thing here and now. Lord Jean, I'll go prepare things now, Dino interrupted. Sure. I wish you luck. Dino left. The shadow of the Kozek fell over the city square. The Holy Kingdom subjects gazed at the gigantic frigate that obscured the sun with anxiety and rage in their eyes. Soon, a wide beam of light sprouted from the bottom of the Kozek, creating a staircase that extended to the ground. The people on board started descending the steps. They could see Karl Zippel with his entire body bound. Karl looked extremely distressed and wore a gray fabric that only low-born prisoners could wear. He approached the ground. The angry people shouted at him. Boo! What have you done to our brothers and sisters? How dare you experiment on humans? Are you not afraid of the gods? You're a mad sorcerer, bastard. People hurled all sorts of insults at a tower master of the Zippel clan, a pure-blooded Zippel at that. Nothing like this had happened in the past few decades. It didn't matter if the problem came from the clan or an individual. The Zippel had always designated representatives to handle any incidents, not the pure-blooded Zippel themselves. The anger in the voices of the people was contagious. The crowd that had been intimidated by the sight of the Kozak was now shouting, ready to tear Karl apart at any moment. Karl bowed his head and said nothing. The White Knight mages behind him showed no emotion. Lonnie had instructions from Jean, so she didn't attempt to calm the people. A person in the crowd observed Lonnie's response and threw a fist-sized stone at Karl. It hit him on the forehead and splattered blood. The voices of the crowd suddenly fell silent. Karl remained with his head lowered. Blood dripped down his forehead, but the White Knight mages behind him did not react. Their silence was a tacit permission that the Zippel clan would not intervene, no matter what was done to Karl Zippel. As Jean expected, the Zippel were going to start making their moves after Karl was killed or severely injured. Say something. Thud. 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 Stones started flying as Karl completely stepped off the staircase of light formed by the Kozak. The stones knocked him down, but he got back up. The sequence repeated 5 more times. Reporters were busy writing this rare scene of retribution. In articles, "Dear people of the Holy Kingdom, please stop for a moment," Lonnie shouted as she slowly stood up. The stoning abruptly stopped, and Karl hesitated as he got up again. "Karl Zippel, before you confess your deeds, there is something I must ask you." "What is it? Were the biological golem experiments truly carried out under your leadership?" Karl could only hear the question as, "Are you the only one behind it, not the entire Zippel clan?" Therefore, he could only respond in the way his father, Kiliak Zippel, had ordered him. "Yes, that's correct. Can you swear to it? You sound like you want to blame the sins on the entire clan, but that wouldn't be right." "Sure. I understand that you might think the Zippel are scapegoating me, but I am the 4th Tower Master and a pure-blooded Zippel. There are many others who could have served as scapegoats. Then why did you come down here yourself? You could have easily assigned others as scapegoats. Because my death is the only way to regain the honor of my clan that I tarnished with my actions. Even if you choose to show mercy, my clan will never have me back. So kill me in their place. You ask for a comfortable death that you don't deserve. The number of our holy subjects who unjustly died due to your experiments amounts to 3,000. Karl Zippel, you will never enjoy death until you testify with clear details about your actions." Lonnie performed healing magic on Karl's wounds. The scars healed immediately. "But Karl, doesn't it seem strange to you?" "What's strange?" "The number of ours who were captured is not 3,000. It was 823. Karl clearly deserved to be the 4th Tower Master. He fell for Lonnie's trick and didn't demonstrate it at all. "Did Vitura Velter send that many people?" "I had no idea." "Sir Karl Zippel." Someone shouted Karl's name and stepped forward. It was Dino Jaglin. "You were not behind those horrific experiments, Sir Karl. Why are you lying? Why are you volunteering to be incriminated?" All eyes in the city square instantly focused on Dino. "Who is this supposed to be? Are you a pawn of the Zippel? Cut the nonsense and get lost. Dear people of the Holy Kingdom, please excuse my manners. I am a journalist. My name is Dino Jaglin. Some of you may know me, and I'm not some pawn writing for the Zippel. I was the first journalist to expose the biological golem experiments carried out by Myron Zippel in Colin." Murmurs followed. "I, Dino Jaglin, can swear on my honor as a journalist and on the honor of the colonites. Whether the rest of the Zippel leaders are involved or not is another matter. But I can firmly state that Sir Karl Zippel has no connection whatsoever to these biological golem experiments." Dino pulled out a handful of bulletins from his bag and scattered them around. Some of the journalists hurried to grab the bulletins to read them. Their eyes widened in astonishment. Even before they finished reading a few lines, their gazes shifted from Dino to Karl. "The fire has spread." Jean smiled inwardly. Until now, only Karl Zippel had to bite the dust. But now, the entire Zippel clan was going to be involved in this mud fight. Dark Magic Guild under the Kinslow? The survivors were rescued at the Dark Magic Guild castle in Old Otyrium, not the fourth magic tower? The Kinslow were known as a third-category terrorist group, and it was said that the Dark Magic Guild had been annihilated by Ryal Zippel, leaving only low-category remnants of their former glory. The bulletins Dino tossed around carried the names of irrelevant organizations that massively lacked importance compared to the Zippel. But it included the fact that an unidentified swordsman known as Vamel had intervened in the meeting between the Zippel and the Kinslow 6 months ago, and Karl had been taken hostage by the Kinslow in the process. "Look, Dino Jaglin, what's all this nonsense?" One of them yelled at Dino. Not many could understand what was going on, even after a quick glance at the bulletin. Few looked kindly upon this young journalist who suddenly intervened in the interrogation. Lady Lonnie refrained from mentioning the name of the hero who saved the survivors, but let me tell you his name instead. Sir Bamel. Yes, it's the supernova that you all know. It was Sir Bamel. What the hell are you talking about? I became a well-known journalist after covering the Colonite massacre. At that time, I wrote that the hero who saved the natives were ordinary passersby. The passerby I mentioned was actually Sir Bamel. I became very close to Sir Bamel following the incident and have been writing about his heroic deeds in my articles. At that moment, Jean was too embarrassed to raise his face, and Murakin had to struggle not to burst into laughter. Dino put on an unabashed yet determined expression. He looked at the people gathered in the square and continued his explanation. And he has been tracking the atrocities committed by the Zippel clan all this time. The Zippel already have a track record of conducting biological experiments against the Colonites. During his pursuit, Sir Bamel came to witness how the Zippel and the Kinslow were conducting a mysterious trade on an abandoned island in the waters of the feudal states of Bellard. Does that have anything to do with the current situation? Please read the upper paragraph of the second page of the bulletin I gave you. The Kinslow are not the third-category terrorist organization you think they are. They are a giant faction that used to be the Zippel clan's biggest ally. Sir Bamel intentionally lied to Lady Lonnie by saying that he rescued the survivors from the fourth magic tower. The reason for that was because Sir Bamel was convinced that not only the Zippel had swallowed up the entire Holy Kingdom and conducted experiments on their people, which is why he wanted to use Karl Zippel's capture in the Kinslow to bring them both to the surface. But Dino couldn't finish everything he wanted to say. "We can't have any more of this." One of the White Knight mages behind Karl shot a mana bolt at Dino. The bolt precisely aimed for Dino's head, and it was so fast that most didn't even realize it. Swish! But someone from the crowd rushed out in an instant and cut off the mana bolt. Whoa! Dino took a step back a moment later, surprised by the figure that cast a shadow over him. And here I thought it was a Huffister tradition to bury the truth with a death. The truth is, this story seems quite entertaining to me. How about we all listen to how it goes? Zippel magicians. It was Joshua Runcandle who saved Dino. But the crowd barely had time to react to the appearance of this well-known figure. The Runcandles haven't suffered any direct threats. There's no need to draw your sword so carelessly. Sheath your sword, second flag-bearer. Luna stood in front of Dino as she shook her head. In fact, she was already in front of Dino before Joshua cut off the mana bolt from the White Knight mage. She had already cut off another mana bolt that flew from another direction with her own hands. Chapter 248. Villain 5. Jean let out a sigh and lowered his hand from his waist. When Dino was attacked, Jean had unconsciously prepared to unleash the mana bolt. Luckily, he managed to stop himself. If his mastery had been lower, he would have acted preemptively and drawn everyone's attention. That would have been a problem. I thought Luna would block any incoming attack. But those crazy bastards. Did they really want to kill Dino in front of all these eyes? That's how sensitively the White Knight mages reacted to Dino's statements. The sorcerers who had shot the mana bolt did their best to maintain a serious face. But Jean and the Runcandles could see through them. They were more than frustrated. For the White Knight mages, the attack itself was a great risk. Even if they had managed to kill Dino, everyone would have criticized them for it. Not even the run candles, who cared about nothing but their own dominance, killed journalists so carelessly. Of course, it would have done much less harm than the truth being revealed. In any case, Luna is still a monster. How many people in the world could block a mana bolt from an 8-star mage with their own hands? Especially an ambush attack like this? Regardless of the current state of affairs, Luna's monstrous strength sent shivers down his spine. Shing. Joshua obeyed Luna and sheathed his sword. He even silently bowed to Luna and admitted his mistake before sheathing his weapon. He felt rebellious, but he understood that there was no reason to belittle the Runcandle name in public. The sudden attack from the White Knight caused a stir. But what was more surprising than the attack was the appearance of Luna Runcandle, the White Whale. She was known for staying away from public opinion, despite the abundant rumors about her. However, bards constantly praised her. Their lyrics described Luna as a martial artist with immense skills and astonishing beauty. When Luna took off her hood, the crowd could barely suppress their astonishment. It wasn't her beauty that confirmed the lyrics. It was the majesty of her deep blue eyes and her unwavering audacity against the White Knight and the Kozak. The audience was completely mesmerized. The following seconds were soaked in a silence that seemed impossible for such a large crowd. "Are you all right, Dino Jaglin?" "Yes, thanks to you." "Thank you, Lady Luna, and Sir Joshua. You made a very interesting claim. I would like to know more, so come visit the Runcandle delegation later," Luna said. Of course. Dino was staying at Luna's estate with the Colonites, but they pretended not to know each other. "Hey, White Knight mages and Carl Zippel. I am Luna Runcandle." Then Luna turned her gaze to the White Knight sorcerers. "Pleased to meet you, Lady Luna. I am Maul Hansirk, the second commander of the White Knight." Maul Hansirk, who led the second unit of the White Knight, had been observing how everything unfolded on the Kozak stairs. "You? It seems they changed the second commander, and I didn't even hear about it. My predecessor, Sir Drew Malaga, retired. If it were Drew, he would have come down those stairs before responding to my greetings." Maul furrowed his brow. He was clearly older than Luna, and since he currently had no superiors, he was the Zippel's representative here. But he was belittled from his very introduction. The gazes of Luna and Maul met, leaving the entire square in suspense. The crowd was completely intimidated by the dominant show of strength from the two giant clans and could barely breathe. It wasn't just the crowd. Even the White Knight mages were tense. The only ones who remained unruffled by this scene were Luna, Jean, and Murakan. There was a good reason why they weren't nervous. Maul Hansirk, to think he would show such blatant disrespect towards my sister. It seems the second unit of the White Knight will have a new commander tomorrow. He should have shown his courtesy to Luna before answering. Although he was older than her and belonged to the Zippel, a lowly second commander of the White Knight had no right to belittle the first flag-bearer of the Runcandle clan. He couldn't show manners to someone he couldn't even defeat in battle. Joshua now looked at Maul with eyes that blatantly revealed his desire to kill. He had even shown respect for Luna against his own wishes. This despicable second commander of the White Knight belittling his sister was infuriating. "Sir Maul, if you find it difficult to resign, I can help you completely get rid of those stairs. Haven't you heard the first flag-bearer?" Joshua growled in a low tone. Maul's face turned red. Shame and a sense of defeat made his body tremble with anger. But fortunately, Maul wasn't terribly foolish. "Please excuse my rudeness, Lady Luna." Maul stepped down from the stairs. The other mages aboard the Kozak followed suit. The crowd didn't understand the exchange and found it difficult to comprehend what was happening. The Zippel were undoubtedly the largest clan in the world, with the Runcandles following closely behind. They couldn't understand why Maul submitted after being insulted. On the other hand, people who had a keen interest in the two clans, especially the nobles, thought that this was how it should have been. "Now we can finally talk. Let me ask you something, Sir Maul. Why did your subordinates attack this journalist?" Carl Zippel received orders from the Patriarch to atone for his sins here. The fourth Tower Master of the Zippel clan has come to pay the price for his crimes with his own life. That man insulted the Zippel clan by obscuring the truth. Obscuring? I admit that I have belittled you, Lady Luna, but you are also interfering in Zippel's affairs. It will only cause mutual harm if it escalates between our clans, so we would like to take this journalist named Dino with us. Maul spoke after fixing his gaze confidently. Whether he was ashamed or not of Luna's intimidation, that didn't change the fact that he still represented the Zippel clan. If he backed down for no reason, his shame would become the least of his concerns. I cannot allow you to do that. On what basis do you countermand it? Haven't you heard me before? I have told this man to visit the Runcandle delegation. Therefore, Dino Jaglin is my guest from this very moment. This is not a personal matter for us. Personal matter, you say? It's not something you want to say to the flag-bearers of Runcandle. Don't you think you're making too many mistakes today? If you don't retreat, we will be forced to take action. He spoke as bravely as he could, but everyone present knew that the White Knight couldn't do anything against Luna and Joshua, including Maul himself. Lord Maul, life is precious. Although that piece of metal floating in the sky is probably more valuable to the Zippels than their own lives. It wouldn't be very good if you had to return dead and with the ship destroyed, would it? Luna flashed a cold smile. 1,000 thoughts, each one more horrifying than the last, rushed through Maul's mind. Were that journalist's statements part of Runcandle's plans to set all this up? How much of our information has leaked to the Runcandles? Luna Runcandle? If we were to fight that monster right now, obviously they would be annihilated. It wouldn't even be called a battle, as everyone would be decapitated before they could board the Kozak. Even if they moved to a remote area and started the fight on board the Kozak, they couldn't guarantee victory against her. However, they couldn't surrender. They had to fight for the reputation of Zippel, even if they were annihilated. The reason they came here with Karl Zippel was for the sake of their reputation. Please calm down. Lonnie had finished treating Karl Zippel. Both the Runcandles and the Zippels are much stronger than the Holy Kingdom, and everyone knows it. But let me remind both of you that we haven't even started the state funeral for His Majesty. Please respect the mourning of this land. Lonnie's words were a saving grace for Maul. It gave him an excuse to back down. He was about to genuinely feel grateful to her. But you have achieved something great, flag-bearers of the Runcandle clan. We nearly chased an innocent man. An innocent man? Look, Lonnie Salome. Our patriarch has sent the 4th Tower Master, his own son, fully aware that he could be stoned to death. Do you think that insignificant journalist's claims can nullify the decision of the Zippel patriarch? Bang. Jean punched Murakan in the side and muttered under his breath. What do you want? Murakan whispered. Yell at him. Tell him to stop with the nonsense and leave. What? Everyone is on edge right now. If someone starts, everyone will go crazy. The faces of the crowd turned red with anger as Maul began yelling at Lonnie. It didn't take a genius to realize that he was making outrageously ridiculous statements to cover up. The problem was that the Zippels were certainly capable of covering things up with ridiculous statements. You could do it yourself. I'm a dragon. Okay? Joshua will recognize my voice. People will stare at you when you yell, so I'll step aside for a moment. At that moment, a woman suddenly shouted. Shut up, dirty bastards from Zippel. When? Will you stop mocking this land blessed by Ayula? She seemed to have a disability in one leg. She was in a wheelchair and wore a robe with a large representation of the dormant volcano shield. It seems I won't have to do it, Murakan hissed. Yes, she did it at the perfect timing, Jean said. The rest of the crowd followed suit and started voicing their opinions as well. Don't kill the journalist who spoke up for the Holy Kingdom. You can't let this happen before the whole truth is revealed. If you kill him, kill us too. Not even the Runcandles would do something like this. Jean observed the scene for a moment but felt that something was off. He shifted his gaze to the woman who had initiated the commotion. Something about her seemed quite familiar. That woman. Where have I seen her before? Or does she just resemble someone I know? Jean stared at her intently. It was impossible for her to feel his gaze from the crowd, but she also slowly turned her head and met his eyes. Did you like it? There was a smile on her face that seemed to say those words. Jean remembered who she was. She's Bishkel's little sister, Margiela Iviliano. She was the one who made Bishkel fight against him at the enemies of the Runcandle clan party. Jean didn't recognize her at first because of the disguise. But those mischievous lips and the characteristic childlike gaze on her face could only belong to Margiela. Lord Jean was too cruel against a weaker opponent. The man on the ground is our friend. Are you just going to stand there and watch? Brother, I'm completely disappointed. Are you telling me to fight against Lord Jean? Yes, maybe you could teach Lord Jean a lesson, in a more honorable way than Lord Jean just showed, of course. He even remembered Margiela and Bishkel's conversation at that time. Bamel, the Kinselo will help you, so don't go too far with us, all right? All's well that ends well. Isn't it? Margiela smiled with her eyes as she uttered those words. Chapter 249. Villain? 6. Jean never liked how Bishkel was put in a difficult situation at the enemy's celebration and enjoyed watching it unfold. At that moment, I thought she was just a petty character. So, she's also part of the Kinselo. It was unexpected. She had no combat skills or magic. And given her disabilities, her belonging to those terrorist groups, no, those third-rate cult fanatics, that's how Jean defined the Kinselo, was a surprise. And what was the reason she chose to reveal herself at that moment? So, the Kinselo want to help me, and in return, they ask me to be lenient with them? If that was all she wanted to convey, she could have sent anyone to deliver the message. It wasn't simply due to the inconveniences caused by her disability. Bishkel was a leader of the Kinselo, and she was his beloved sister. The Kinselo were clearly aware that Jean had eliminated anyone he crossed paths with from their ranks. But why would they send him such a valuable person? Jean couldn't accept this logic. I don't know what their deal is, but I have a feeling she may have some special abilities like Yona, or Bouvard. He could always investigate it later. There was no point racking his brains now. First and foremost, Jean decided to respond. Not by speaking like her, but with a gesture that everyone could understand. Me? Jean pointed to himself with his index finger. He was going to pretend he didn't understand what Margiela was saying. Kinselo will help you. Margiela pronounced the words again. Jean made the "Are you talking to me?" gesture again, looked around, and then shrugged as if he didn't understand what was going on. Margiela pounded her chest in frustration. Come on, don't they teach lip-reading in the Runcandle clan? She tried again several times, but with the same result. On the fourth try, Jean didn't even look at her anymore. Margiela concluded that she hadn't successfully conveyed her message to Jean. She didn't expect this at all and wished she could approach Jean and speak with her own voice instead of lip-syncing. But her wheelchair made it quite difficult. Jean had a reason for pretending not to understand her. The Kinselo will have to help me, no matter what I do. If they're so eager to help, there's no need for me to play along. And the reason they offered help was quite obvious. The Zippels were taking all the blame, so they wanted to be careful. Jean, what is it, Murakin? That woman in a wheelchair seems to be trying to tell you something. Don't stare blatantly, but observe her carefully. We'll have to get to know her later. Is she your type? No, she's from the Kinselo. Quietly capture her when the crowd disperses. This love was destined to fail, huh? You can do it, right? Why are you even asking? Of course, it's a piece of cake. Don't kill the journalist. Give us the truth. The enraged mob continued their demands. Half of them cursed the Zippels, and the other half cheered for the Runcandles, who were blocking the Zippels. Luna and Joshua pressured the White Knight mages with just their gaze. The Zippels couldn't force the situation or retreat. Jin's gaze fell on the people busily jotting things down in the midst of the crowd. They were all journalists. It was a strange sight. The Zippels, who were normally the symbol of benevolence and justice, were being criticized, and the Runcandles, the symbol of evil and domination, were gaining support. This was exactly what Jean wanted. Although for now, the scene was limited to the central square of the Holy Kingdom, Jin's ultimate goal was to change the world's perception. Of course, he didn't want the Runcandles to replace the Zippels and become the new symbol of justice because he didn't believe in them either. However, that didn't mean he wanted to see those hypocritical Zippels ruling the world. Those idiotic Zippels will have to retreat for now if they don't intend to fight Luna and massacre the crowd here. Maul shook his head. He thought the same as Jean. There was no justification for pushing the Holy Kingdom to kill Karl Zippel and call it a day. White Knight, let's return to the clan. Maul shouted angrily. The White Knight mages shared his feelings. They had never been so embarrassed since joining Zippel's elite mage group. A wise decision, Sir Maul. Luna smiled broadly and waved her hand toward Maul's back. Maul and the White Knight mages began ascending the staircase of light that extended from Kozek. Luna also turned around. Let's leave the scene as well, second flagbearer. Understood. Dino, see you later. The two hooded figures slowly made their way through the crowd. Luna didn't say anything to Lonnie because she knew that anything she said would be seen as an attempt by the Runcandle clan to intervene in the Holy Kingdom. And also because the Runcandles would look much better that way. The clan that would surely be ruled by her younger brother someday. The screams and cries of the people turned into joyous cheers. It was for the Runcandle flagbearers and the victory they achieved by pushing back the forces of Zippel. Amidst all the cheers, Karl Zippel remained silent, shackled. The White Knight didn't take Karl with them when they left. It was the rational response. If they ever took Zippel back to the clan, the Zippels would effectively be admitting the fact that he was a scapegoat. Sir Karl, allow me to ask you one last time. Are you truly involved in the biological experiments? Lonnie asked as she looked at Karl. Kill me. I don't want to make excuses. Clearly, we will if it is revealed that you are indeed guilty. But if it turns out to be a false accusation, you will rot for eternity in the Holy Kingdoms. Underground cells. Knights of the Golden Shield. Lock Sir Karl away. Every single journalist present in the plaza that afternoon got the scoop of their lives. Consequently, the entire world was bombarded with various breaking news stories in the afternoon. Karl Zippel's confession, the details revealed by Dino, the identity of the Kinselo, and the confrontation between the White Knight and the Runcandles, among others. No single nation's incident had spread so rapidly in the past decade. The Runcandle-affiliated journalists represented by the allied kingdoms of Huister and the Zippel-affiliated journalists represented by the Ludero-Magical Federation were at war. The Runcandles wrote that the White Knight couldn't handle two Runcandle flagbearers, even after summoning the Kozek. Meanwhile, the Zippels wrote it off as the mercy of the White Knight. But the battlefield tilted in favor of the Runcandles from the beginning. It wasn't surprising, given that the first whistleblower, Dino, belonged to Hufister and the White Knight had returned home empty-handed. Neutral press outlets published articles predicting who might be behind the biological golems. It was essentially a plagiarism of Dino's bulletins, but that in itself was more than enough information. However, the name Bammel generated the most intrigue. Of all, who the hell was Bammel? Why was he exposing the corruption of the Zippel clan? People around the world expressed more curiosity about him than sympathy for the Holy Kingdom's suffering. The fact that their attention for others' pain didn't match their wild enthusiasm for intriguing stories was a bitter truth to swallow. But it still helped the Holy Kingdom in the end. Uncovering Bammel's previous actions was the best way to reveal the truth. Damn it, that human. What was she supposed to be? Meanwhile, Murahin was furious ever since they left the city plaza. He lost track of Margila. I was following her closely, no problem. But when she turned a corner, she vanished like a wisp of smoke. All right. No one's blaming you. There's no need to be so mad about it. For some reason, it hurts my ego. I regained 40% of my strength. How could I lose track of a simple human? To make matters worse, disappearing like that can only mean she knew I was tailing her from the start. Damn it! I think Margila also has a special power, just like Yona, Bouvard, or that leader of the Kinselo. Those guys aren't even deities. Why do they keep showing up with weird powers? The Demon God Stone was Kinselo's doing, remember? Maybe they're trying to become deities. It was a shame they lost Margila. But Jean hoped Murakin would lose her. They must have had some security measures in place when sending such a valuable person. Anyway, this effort to repay the favor is reaching its final phase. The process of revealing the whole truth will have some bumps along the way, but the conditions are set for Lonnie to ascend the throne after the trial and investigations come to an end. Lonnie had been at the center of all the Holy Kingdom's operations that took place after the false Holy King's death. The corrupt officials hadn't fully rallied to her side yet. But now that the Zippel's deeds had been revealed, they no longer had much power in the kingdom anyway. Power belonged to the people. Vitura's list spread worldwide through bulletins, and the Holy Kingdom's sacred subjects memorized each traitor by name. The Zippels could no longer hold them. They were practically finished. Instead, every last subject of the kingdom supported Lonnie. Lonnie still remained in the city plaza, and more sacred subjects had filled the plaza, even more than when Karl Zippel was sent to Vankila. To be precise, people were gathered in the capital of the Holy Kingdom, not just in the central plaza. People from all over the kingdom had come to protect Lonnie, and the plaza couldn't accommodate them all anymore. And it wasn't just the Vankilans. There were many outsiders who had come to genuinely sympathize with the Holy Kingdom's sufferings. There were still people willing to look beyond the intriguing tales. That may be true, but the religious fanatic, that girl, I'm not sure if she can pull this off. The events that unfolded were too big for a person like her to handle. Make sure to take care of her when you become a flag-bearer, Murakan said. If she needs to be taken care of, then they shouldn't make her queen in the first place. I think Lady Lonnie will do well. She held onto her faith amidst a group of people excluding her. Remember, goodness, you're so cold-hearted. Well, I suppose you're right. That's what it means to be a monarch in the human world, although most of the kings and queens I've seen in my 3,000 years of life weren't true ones at all. The trials were about to begin. It was a trial to judge the traitors, including the Pontiffs Montiano and Canu. As the trials were presided over by loyal officials who never yielded their will, it was unlikely the traitors would escape a death sentence. Vitura lost his life and his honor, including his future after death. Those guys deserve at least the same. After the trials, a good 90% of the Holy Kingdom's officials would be executed. The state funeral and memorial service for the victims of the biological golem experiments would only take place after the executions. By the way, I'm not sure what Kinslow meant by helping me. Jean suddenly remembered what Margila had told him. His curiosity would be answered the next morning. Chapter 250. Almost 500 ships approached the eastern port of the Holy Kingdom. It was a fleet that should never have appeared by surprise. In fact, the fleet wasn't even led by an ally of the Holy Kingdom. It was a fleet of half-orcs led by Barak Sidlikar, the great warrior of the White Werewolves. He brought 500 ships into the territorial waters of the Holy Kingdom without permission. From the Holy Kingdom's perspective, this was practically a declaration of war. But surprisingly, the 500 ships flew a strip of black fabric on their highest mast to express their condolences. The cannons on the ship hulls were removed, and each ship had a white werewolf waving a giant black flag at its helm. They hadn't come for war. They had come to express their grief. It was the largest delegation in history ever sent to convey condolences. Are those guys crazy? Clearly, they know the Holy Kingdom is in a mess. How could they send 500 ships with condolences as an excuse? Murakan shook his head. Now that their name was brought to the surface by Dino, the Kinslow are trying to show off their magnitude, that they're not a third-rate terrorist group. I don't know whose idea it was, but it's a clever move. A clever move? The Kinslow said they would help me, remember? But if the world considers the Kinslow nothing more than a bunch of riffraff, no one will trust anything they offer to the Holy Kingdom. I guess that makes sense. We're a large faction that can afford to send 500 ships just to express condolences. That's what they're trying to say. Those human journalists must be having a feast. It was quite strange that the Kinslow were revealing themselves so openly, contrasting with how they had been concealing the scale of their forces until now. Is it no longer necessary to continue hiding their power? Or have they simply been waiting for the right opportunity to bring it to the surface? Whatever the reason, the Zippels had to be furious. They had forsaken their reputation for benevolence to conceal the fact that Karl had been kidnapped by a third-rate terrorist act, but now the Kinslow were actively flaunting their scale. The Holy Kingdom only allowed one in every 500 ships to dock at the port. Not only was it impossible to accommodate the 500 ships, but it was also too superfluous for expressing condolences. Berakt, 5 of his half-orc aides, and 20 bound humans disembarked from the docked ship. Barakt's towering stature caught everyone's attention. His aides were also renowned white werewolf warriors in the world of half-men. But they couldn't match the strength radiating from Berakt. They immediately headed to the portal gate to reach the capital. Once in the capital, they made their way to the central plaza where Lonnie was. Every step Berakt took made the crowd around him tremble. They couldn't even look directly at him, like animals facing their natural predators. Berakt didn't show them any courtesy, but the crowd was too intimidated to begin booing. It was very different from when the White Knight had arrived at Kozek. Berakt finally reached Lonnie and stood before her. The Golden Shield Sacred Knights were on high alert as they waited for him to speak. Jean and Murakan also observed the scene. "Boy," Murakan said. "Yes, that guy is pretty strong. I'm not sure if even your older sister can handle him." That was Murakan's assessment of Berakt. "I am Berakt Sidliker, the great warrior of the White Werewolves and the commander-in-chief of the Kinslow Revolutionary Forces. I have come to mourn the death of Miklin, the Holy King." "Thank you, Berakt Sidliker. Lady Lonnie, you may not know, but I owed a debt to the Holy King about 30 years ago. I was gravely wounded in battle. Miklin was meditating in our lands and healed me. I remember my father telling me how he performed penance in the lands of the half-men around that time, but I didn't know about this particular incident. He was the finest human I've ever known. I offer my deepest condolences." The crowd was completely shocked. The White Werewolves were famous for treating humans like insects. The fact that a great white werewolf warrior had come was already a shock. But in their lives, they had never imagined that the werewolf warrior would be able to speak like a gentleman. Lonnie's gaze fell on the bound humans behind Berakt. They wore dirty and tattered Zippel robes. "The bound humans behind me are Zippel prisoners we had under our custody. When we used to be allied with the Zippels, these individuals carried out biological experiments on our land, under the orders of the Zippel Patriarch. What? These prisoners will confess the rest. I pray for your nation's swift recovery from its grief." The crowd murmured. Meanwhile, Jean became curious once again about who could have devised such strategies within the Kinslow. After flaunting their might, they treated Lonnie as if she were the leader of this nation. On top of that, they even caught Kiliak attributing the biological experiments to him. Shifting all the blame to the Zippels was always going to be a mud fight. In that sense, Barakt's statement was an excellent attack against the Zippels. Although it's shameless of them to say it, considering the fact that the biological experiments were a collaborative effort between the Kinslow and the Zippels. But for now, expelling the Zippels from the Holy Kingdom was the top priority. They could always press charges against the Kinslow after the Holy Kingdom had somewhat restored itself. In any case, the Kinslow were revealing themselves to the world now and could be traced. Before Lonnie could choose her response, Berakt spoke again. "My prolonged presence will only disturb others, so I will depart immediately. It is true that we were also allied with the Zippels, so we will take responsibility for our part at a later time." It was confirmed that all the prisoners handed over by Berakt were Zippel Academy mages. They revealed all the experiments the Zippels had conducted on the people of the Holy Kingdom. Their confessions matched most of the records left by Mertual Sela, and they also revealed some experiments the Zippels had carried out without anyone's assistance. And through their confessions, the world learned that there were more experimentation facilities within the Holy Kingdom. The Zippels had built secret laboratories in the northern part of the capital and in some other cities. That was the conclusive piece. Lonnie and the sacred subjects of the kingdom were shocked and horrified to discover that the Zippels possessed experimentation facilities even within the kingdom. Jean thought the same. "I thought the ideal outcome after revealing that Karl Zippel was nothing more than a scapegoat was to expel the Zippels after ruining their reputation. But this changes things. And to think they even made facilities within the Holy Kingdom. No one in the Holy Kingdom considered the Zippels a benevolent and just mage clan anymore. But despite all these things, The Zippels had yet to make any additional statements. The Kinselo helped you a lot. No, that wouldn't be correct. Boy, maybe I should say you got a lot out of them, Murakin said. That would be correct. I'm not going to let them off either. At this rate, Kinselo won't lose anything with this incident. They only gained in reputation as a successful organization capable of abducting Zippel mages and tower masters. Although the Dark Magic Guild was completely annihilated, and they also lost Ryal Zippel's magic tome, that's true. That's not enough. We have to show people that the Kinselo are as dirty as the Zippels. I've practically stripped them of all their uses in the Holy Kingdom, so it's about time I get rid of them. What do you plan to do? Jean was about to respond when someone abruptly knocked on the door of the room they were in. Mr. Jean, an urgent voice. It was Kashmir. Mr. Kashmir? What's the matter? Karl Zippel has been murdered. Jean and Murakin immediately stood up. What did you say? Weren't the underground cells guarded by the loyal Golden Shield Knights? The killer broke through the Golden Shield Patrol. They must have been sent by the Zippels. Karl Zippel shouldn't be dead now. He had to be alive if they wanted to prove that Kiliak had used his own innocent son as a scapegoat. Furthermore, Karl's death deprived the Holy Kingdom of justification to press the Zippel clan. Now, it would be interpreted that the Holy Kingdom had executed the man the Zippels had sent as the culprit of the biological experiments. Since Karl was dead, the Zippels could say, the crimes have been paid with blood. Of course, it was a Zippel assassin who had killed Karl and not the Holy Kingdom. But the truth barely mattered. The Zippels' bloodhounds could always start spreading fake news about how the Holy Kingdom was making excessive demands, even after Karl was found dead. To preempt the scapegoats, the scapegoat had to be kept alive. The Zippel press is starting to make moves. They claim the Zippels have paid the fair price. Human beings are definitely a foolish race, but they won't believe that nonsense, right? Insect. Anyone can see that Karl was killed by the Zippels. Of course, no one in the Holy Kingdom would believe it, but outsiders would. Think that Karl was killed in the process of excessive torture to extract confessions. And the murder will be seen as a made-up story by the Holy Kingdom to cover up that fact. Because... Kashmir let out a long sigh and continued. The Zippels, those bastards, left Bamel's name at the crime scene. Jean and Murakin's eyes widened in surprise. I will wash away the grievances of the sacred subjects with your blood, Bamel. That was the phrase the assassin engraved on the entrance wall of the prison with a sword after killing Karl, according to Kashmir. The journalists went and checked the phrase on the wall. They deliberately left it at the entrance, not in the isolated cell where Karl was held. They wanted everyone to see it. I understand their intentions. Reputation for justice and power. They lost both thanks to me, so they want me to reveal my identity. That would be my assumption as well, Lord Jean. Karl's killer identified himself as Bamel. But as Murakin said, no one would believe that. But if the real Bamel didn't come forward to officially deny the accusation, the Holy Kingdom could no longer pressure the Zippels for their crimes. Regardless of the culprit and the method of murder, Karl was dead. On the other hand, if Jean, the real Bamel, revealed himself to the public and proved that he wasn't the killer, the Zippels' reputation would hit rock bottom. Not only in the Holy Kingdom but in the entire world. The title of villainy and dominion, once belonging to the Runcandles, could now belong to the Zippels. What are your plans? They're trying very hard to play the villains. I should oblige them. I will make an official statement denying the accusations. I respect your will, Lord Jean, but revealing your identity is too risky. Like you said, they have lost their reputation for justice and power. That's why they want to find that man called Bamel, to set an example and show what happens to those who go against the Zippels. Isn't it? Jean smiled. On the contrary, if the one who rebelled against the Zippels remains alive without much trouble, that would be a great loss on their part itself. Turned out for the better. I will reveal myself and mess with the Kinselo too.